Sometimes love doesn't whisper, I miss you. Sometimes it sells. The only place that ever felt like home just to protect the person who built it. The sea was quiet that evening, as if it knew that something sacred was ending. The waves rolled in slow, deliberate sighs, licking the edges of the pale sand where old footprints had already faded like memories that had finally learned to let go. Clara stood at the edge of the porch, her fingers wrapped around the wooden rail that her mother, Margaret, had painted herself years ago. The white paint was chipping, now soft with salt and time. Behind her, the house creaked gently, that same sound she had grown up with. The one that had always made her feel safe, but tonight, it sounded different. Tonight, it sounded like goodbye. Clara? Her mother's voice, soft but curious, came from the kitchen. Are you packing already? Clara quickly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand before turning around. Almost, Mom, she called out, forcing a smile. Just finishing a few things. Margaret stepped into the doorway. The light from the kitchen framed her, a frail woman with silver hair tied neatly at the back. Wearing her favorite faded blue sweater, there was a quiet grace in her. The kind of grace only years of love and loss could create. I'm glad we're taking a trip, Margaret said gently. It'll be good for us to get away. The air here, it's too still lately. Clara nodded, her chest tightening. Yes, she whispered, it's time for a change. She looked at her mother and thought of all the years they had spent in this house, the beach parties when she was little, the storms they watched together from the porch, the laughter that once filled these rooms like sunlight. Every corner of this place held a story. And now, she was about to erase them all. The secret sale 3 weeks ago, Clara had done something she'd never imagined herself capable of. She had met with a real estate agent from the city, a man named Daniel Hayes. Young, polished, and just distant enough to make it all feel unreal. He had stood in this very living room admiring the ocean view. It'll sell fast, he'd said. Properties like this are rare. Are you sure about this, Miss Turner? Clara remembered nodding, her voice small. Yes. I'm sure, but she wasn't. Not even close. She had signed the papers anyway, every stroke of ink feeling like a betrayal. She told herself it was for a reason she couldn't bring herself to tell her mother. Yet that night, after Margaret went to bed, Clara sat alone on the porch with her phone, reading the message again from St. Mercy's Medical Center. Subject: billing notice urgent. Dear Ms. Turner, due to the outstanding balance of $82,400 for your mother's long-term treatment plan, her stomach twisted. She had done everything she could, taken extra shifts, borrowed from friends, even sold her car, but the bills kept coming. And then came the letter: without payment, treatment will be discontinued. Selling the beach house had become the only way left to keep her mother alive. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the lace curtains, washing the kitchen in a soft golden glow. Margaret was already up, humming quietly as she made tea. Morning, sweetheart, she said with a smile. You were up late. Clara smiled weakly. Just couldn't sleep. I was thinking about the trip. Margaret poured tea into 2 cups. It's funny, she said softly. This house has always felt like it belonged to the sea more than to me. I'm surprised it hasn't floated away by now. Clara chuckled, but her eyes filled. Her mother always found beauty in everything, even in endings. As they sat together, Clara's phone buzzed. She glanced down. Daniel Hayes transfer complete. Buyer takes possession tomorrow at noon. She froze. The words seemed to echo in her skull. Tomorrow? Her mother noticed the change in her face. Something wrong? Clara forced a smile. No, nothing, just work. But inside, her heart was unraveling. Flashback: the day it all changed. A year ago, Margaret had collapsed in the garden. The doctors said it was early onset Alzheimer's, fast progressing, unpredictable. Clara had spent nights researching, praying, hoping it was just exhaustion. But the truth had come like a tide, unstoppable and cruel. In the months that followed, the beach house became both a sanctuary and a prison. Margaret forgot small things first: where she'd put her keys, what day it was, and then bigger things, like the name of the family dog they'd once had. But she never forgot the beach. Every evening she'd sit by the window, smiling at the sea as if it were an old friend. This house, she once said, it remembers for me when I can't. And that was the moment Clara realized the house wasn't just wood and paint, it was memory itself. The farewell. That evening, Clara packed the last box: photos, letters, the seashell necklace she made when she was 10. She tucked them carefully into her bag, her hands trembling. Margaret came into the room quietly. Are you ready for tomorrow? Clara nodded, though her throat burned. Yes, Mom. I am. Margaret smiled and touched her daughter's cheek. You've always been strong, Clara. Stronger than you think. Clara bit her lip to stop the tears. I'm not so sure about that. Of course you are, Margaret whispered. Your father would be proud. Those words broke her, because this wasn't strength, this was survival. And it was killing her. Later that night, after her mother had fallen asleep, Clara walked out to the beach. The tide was low, the moon high. She sat in the sand, letting the wind push against her face. She whispered into the night, I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. Her phone buzzed again. Another message: Daniel Hayes, buyer confirmed for 12 p.m. tomorrow. Be ready for key handover. She looked back at the glowing windows of the beach house, her mother's silhouette faintly visible through the curtains, and she broke down completely. The promise of tomorrow as dawn crept across the horizon. Clara made a silent vow to herself tomorrow. She would take her mother away from this place, away from the memories, away from the pain. She told herself it was mercy, but deep down, she knew Mercy had never felt this cruel. Some goodbyes are quiet not because they're easy, but because the heart knows that if it speaks it will never let go. The morning came slow and heavy like the sea before a storm. The air was thick with salt and silence. Seagulls wheeled above the roof, crying into the dawn, as if mourning something they couldn't name. Clara stood by the window, watching the light spread over the waves. Her mother was still asleep in the next room. It should have been peaceful this moment before everything changed, but instead it felt like standing on the edge of something. She couldn't come back from. The house smelled of coffee and old wood. Every sound, the tick of the wall clock, the creak of the floorboards, the hum of the kettle felt amplified, as though the house itself was memorizing her the drive to nowhere. By 10 o'clock, their bags were loaded into the car. Margaret stood on the porch, looking out at the water one last time. She smiled faintly as though seeing something only she could. It's strange, she said softly. I thought leaving would hurt more. Clara swallowed hard. Maybe, because it's not really goodbye. We'll visit again soon. Margaret nodded, still gazing at the sea. You always say that. Clara helped her into the car, closed the door, and for a long moment, just stood there, staring at the house. The white shutters, the seashell wind chime her father had hung when she was little, the marks on the porch railing where she'd carved her initials next to his CT plus JT. Forever by the sea. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to walk away. When the car started, Margaret reached over and touched her hand. You're shaking, she said gently. Clara smiled through trembling lips. Just tired, Mom. Long night. The engine hummed, the tires rolled over gravel. And as the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, Clara felt something inside her shatter quietly. A message from the buyer. They were barely an hour down the coastal road when Clara's phone buzzed. Daniel Hayes' buyer will be arriving early. She insists on meeting you personally. Is that okay? Clara frowned. That hadn't been part of the plan. She was supposed to hand over the keys to Daniel, not to anyone else. She texted back quickly, who's the buyer? A few seconds later the reply came. Name's Evelyn Moore. She said she has a personal connection to the property. Clara's stomach dropped. A personal connection? That didn't make sense. No one but her family had ever lived there. She stared at the message until her mother's voice pulled her back. Everything okay, sweetheart? Clara forced a smile. Yeah, just work again. But her mind was already racing. Who was this Evelyn Moore? And what connection could she possibly have to the house? The motel stop. By afternoon, the sky had turned gray, clouds rolling in from the sea. They stopped at a small seaside motel off Highway 9, a lonely place with faded curtains and a flickering neon sign that read Ocean Rest. Clara carried their bags inside. Her mother sat by the window humming softly, her gaze lost somewhere beyond the rain. You used to love road trips, Margaret said suddenly. Clara smiled. Yeah, I did. Remember the time we drove all night just to see the sunrise in Maine? Margaret laughed, a sound so fragile it almost broke Clara's heart. You spilled hot chocolate on my lap, and your father kept teasing us the whole way. For a moment, it felt like old times. For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. But then her mother's expression shifted. Clara? She asked quietly. Why are we leaving again? Clara froze because she took a slow breath. Because it's time for a new start, Mom. Margaret tilted her head. New start? Did something happen to the house? Clara's pulse quickened. No. Of course not. Margaret's eyes narrowed, faintly confused but gentle. I thought I heard you crying last night. Clara's throat tightened. You were dreaming, Mom. Margaret nodded slowly, her confusion fading. Yes, maybe I was. But the way she looked at her daughter, calm, almost knowing, sent a chill through Clara. The letter. Later that night, after her mother fell asleep, Clara sat alone in the motel lobby. The storm outside rattled the windows. She opened her laptop, checking her emails. A new message from Daniel. Final transfer confirmed, funds wired. Evelyn Moore requests a meeting at 12 p.m. tomorrow at the property. Before taking possession, attached was a digital signature. Clara clicked it open and froze. Evelyn Moore's signature looked hauntingly familiar. The way the E curved into the M. The confident slant. She'd seen that handwriting before. But where? Her chest tightened. She dug through her files, old photos, old letters, until she found it. A postcard from her father, sent years ago when he was away on business. The note read, For my girls, by the sea, never sell this place. It's our forever, and signed beneath it, James Turner, and E.M. Her eyes widened. Her father had once written that this house belonged to James Turner and Yem. But Yem wasn't her mother's initials. Margaret Turner was M.T. So who was Yem? And why was Evelyn Moore now claiming the house? The storm and the secret. The wind howled harder, rain battered the roof. Clara's mind spun with questions. She didn't want to ask, had her father owned the house with someone else? Another woman? Was Evelyn Moore part of a secret her mother had never known? And worst of all, what if her mother did know, and had been pretending all along? Clara shut her laptop and stared at the window. The lightning flashed, illuminating her reflection. Pale, trembling, lost, her phone buzzed again. A text, unknown number. You shouldn't have sold it. Clara, her heart stopped. Message. Her fingers cold. Who is this? She typed. No reply, only the distant crash of thunder, and the soft sound of her mother's voice from the next room, murmuring in her sleep. James, no, please don't go. The name in the shadows outside. The storm raged inside. Clara sat frozen. Realizing she had just sold more than a house, she had sold a secret buried beneath Itone that someone clearly didn't want forgotten, and tomorrow when she returned to meet Evelyn Moore, the truth would finally begin to surface. Sometimes the truth doesn't come knocking. It walks through the door with your father's eyes and a name you've never heard but one your heart somehow recognizes. The storm had cleared by morning, but the world still felt bruised. The sky hung low and heavy, the air wet with the smell of rain and seaweed. Clara drove in silence, her mother half asleep beside her, humming an old lullaby that had once soothed nightmares. The closer they got to the coast, the louder the ocean grew, a low, endless growl like something ancient waiting to speak. Clara's hands tightened on the wheel. Her pulse thudded in her throat. She wasn't ready for this meeting. Not for Evelyn Moore. Not for the questions clawing at the edges of her mind. She had told Daniel she'd return alone to hand over the keys, but her mother refused to stay at the motel. I want to see the house one more time, Margaret had said with quiet certainty. And Clara hadn't been able to say no. Arrival. The beach house stood exactly as they'd left it, only quieter, as if holding its breath. The morning mist clung to the railings, and the wind chimes tinkled faintly, like ghosts whispering between the notes. Clara parked the car and helped her mother out. Margaret's eyes lit up, soft and distant. Oh, it's even more beautiful after the rain. Clara smiled weakly. Yeah, it is. As they walked toward the porch, a black car pulled into the driveway. A woman stepped out, tall, elegant, mid-50s perhaps, dressed in a sand-colored coat and dark sunglasses. Her hair was silver blonde, her posture precise. Clara felt her stomach tighten. This had to be Evelyn Moore. The meeting. Miss Turner? The woman asked, removing her sunglasses. Clara nodded yes. You must be Ms. Moore. Evelyn smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Just Evelyn. Please, thank you for coming back. I know this must be difficult. Her voice was calm, refined, yet there was a strange familiarity in it, a tone that pulled at some memory buried deep within Clara's chest. Evelyn glanced at Margaret, her expression softening. And this must be your mother. Margaret tilted her head politely. Have we met? Evelyn hesitated just for a heartbeat. No, she said quietly. I don't believe we have. But Clara caught at the flicker. The way Evelyn's gaze lingered too long. They walked through the house together. The silence between them carried more weight than words ever could. Evelyn trailed her fingers over the walls, over the shelves where framed photos once stood. This place, she murmured. It's full of memories. Clara folded her arms. It was my father's favorite place. Evelyn turned slightly. James Turner, wasn't it? Clara's chest tightened. Yes. You knew him? A long pause. The sound of the waves outside filled the gap. Finally, Evelyn said softly, I did. A long time ago. Margaret's confusion. Margaret, standing by the window, smiled faintly at the sea. My husband used to say the ocean keeps secrets, she said dreamily. It always brings them back. Eventually Evelyn's eyes flicked toward her, something unreadable behind them. He was right. Clara frowned. What kind of connection did you have with my father, Ms. Moore? Evelyn didn't answer right away. She walked to the mantelpiece, picked up a small photo Clara had missed while packing, an old picture of her father, young and tan, standing on the very same beach, a wide grin on his face. He loved this place, Evelyn said quietly. He once told me he'd die here if he could. Clara stepped closer. You knew him well then? Evelyn looked up, and for the first time, Clara saw tears glimmer in her eyes. Yes, she whispered. I did the photograph. Margaret wandered toward the staircase, lost in her own world. I think I'll rest for a bit, she said softly. Of course, Mom, Clara replied as soon as her mother disappeared upstairs. Clara turned to Evelyn, her voice sharper. Now I deserve to know who you are. Evelyn sighed, setting the photo back on the mantel. I thought your mother might tell you one day. Clara's pulse quickened. Tell me what? Evelyn reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small weathered photograph. She handed it to Clara with trembling hands. In the picture was her father James Turner sitting on the hood of an old convertible. Beside him stood Evelyn younger, laughing, sunlight in her hair. His arm was around her shoulders and behind them the beach house. Clara's breath caught. This can't be real. Evelyn's voice broke slightly. It's real. That photo was taken the year before he met your mother. Clara's mind spun. You were what? His girlfriend? Evelyn looked down. More than that. I was his fiancée, the promise he broke. Evelyn sat on the couch, her hands folded neatly. Her voice was steady now, almost rehearsed. James and I bought this house together. We built it with our own hands, every nail, every board. It was supposed to be our forever home. Clara felt her throat close. But he married my mother. Yes, Evelyn said softly. He did. The room went silent again. The sea outside roared like it was listening. Evelyn's eyes glistened. He left without saying goodbye. I only found out he'd married a year later. I couldn't hate him though. I tried, but I couldn't. She looked around the house, her fingers brushing the walls once more. When he passed, I thought maybe fate would bring me back here someday. And when I saw the listing under your name, I knew it was time. The secret letters. Clara could barely breathe. You mean my father owned this house with you? Evelyn nodded. Half of it. But after he left, he transferred it fully to his new wife, your mother. I didn't contest it. I thought maybe he needed to forget me. But why contact me now? Clara whispered. Why buy it back? Evelyn looked her straight in the eyes. Because this house holds something you don't know. Something he wanted both of us to find if fate ever brought us here again. She reached into her purse again and pulled out a small sealed envelope. It was yellowed with age. On the front, in James Turner's handwriting, were the words for Clara. When the sea brings her home. Clara's heart stopped. Where did you get this? She whispered. Evelyn smiled faintly. He left it with me. Said I'd know when to give it to you. Margaret's return. Before Clara could open it, footsteps creaked on the stairs. Her mother appeared, pale and trembling, one hand gripping the railing. Her voice was soft but steady. Evelyn Moore, she said quietly. I remember you now. Clara turned in shock. Mom? You said you didn't know her. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I didn't. Until I saw that photo. Evelyn stood slowly. Their eyes met. Decades of unspoken history crackling in the air. I'm sorry, Evelyn said. I never meant for it to happen this way. Margaret's lips trembled. You were the one he wrote to, weren't you? The letters I found after he died. Clara's breath hitched. Letters. Margaret nodded weakly. He never stopped writing her, even after he married me. The letter from the past. The storm outside began to rise again, echoing the chaos inside. Clara clutched the letter, her mind spinning between disbelief and betrayal. Her father had loved another woman her mother had known. And now, both of them had kept it from her. But the letter, sealed and waiting all these years, held the truth neither of them had spoken. As the first raindrops hit the porch, Clara whispered. What did you want me to find, Dad? Some truths don't shatter you all at once. They unfold slowly, like a letter you wish you'd never opened, written in the handwriting of the man you thought you knew. The wind had picked up again, moaning softly through the cracks in the old windows. The house seemed alive, listening, breathing, remembering. Clara sat at the kitchen table, her trembling hands resting on the envelope. The paper was yellowed, edges brittle, like it had been waiting decades for this moment. Her mother, Margaret, sat across from her, silent and pale. Evelyn stood near the window, staring out at the restless sea. Her reflection ghost-like against the glass. No one spoke, only the sound of the waves filled the room. Finally, Clara took a deep breath. If I don't open it now, she whispered, I never will. She slid her finger under the flap. The paper tore with a sound that felt too loud, too final. Inside was a single folded sheet. The ink was faded, but unmistakable, her father's handwriting. The letter. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, then life has brought you back to the sea, the place where everything began, and where perhaps everything must end. There are things I could never tell you while I was alive. I was a coward, too afraid to hurt the people I loved most. But you deserve the truth, even if it comes too late. Before I met your mother, I loved someone else. Her name was Evelyn Moore. Together we built this house, a home for dreams that never came true. I left her because I thought I could bury the past. But I was wrong. You cannot bury love. It grows roots in your silence. Your mother knew about Evelyn. She forgave me, but forgiveness isn't forgetting. Every day I saw her carry that pain with grace. I didn't deserve this house. Our beach house was never just ours. It was meant to be shared. Both women I loved helped build it in their own way. That is the truth I leave behind. That love, in all its brokenness, can still create something beautiful if the day ever comes when the sea brings you back here, and the truth stands before you. Don't run from it. This house belongs to both of them. And to you. There's one last thing I hid beneath the floorboards of the master bedroom, something that belongs to all three of you. It will explain what my words cannot forgive me. Clara, I wanted to be a good man. Instead, I became a memory holding 3 hearts hostage. Love always. Dad. Clara's hands shook as she finished reading. The room felt smaller, heavier, filled with ghosts of the past. Her mother's face was wet with tears, but her voice was steady. He never showed me that letter, she whispered. He must have written it after he got sick. Evelyn turned from the window, eyes glistening. He came to see me before he died, she said softly. I thought he just wanted closure. I didn't know he'd left something behind. Clara folded the letter carefully, her chest burning with a mix of anger, grief and confusion. So what now? She asked quietly. Do we just dig up secrets until there's nothing left of him? Margaret reached across the table, touching her daughter's hand. Sometimes the truth doesn't destroy what's left, she said. Sometimes it saves what's still there, the hidden compartment. The 3 women moved to the master bedroom. The air smelled of old wood and salt. The floorboards creaked as they walked. Margaret pointed toward the far corner near the window. That's where he used to sit and write, she said softly. He always said that corner. Listen best. Clara knelt down, running her fingers along the boards. One plank felt slightly raised. She pried it open carefully with a letter opener. Beneath the floor was a small tin box, wrapped in an oilcloth to protect it from moisture. Her heart raced. She lifted it out and set it on the bed. The hinges squeaked as she opened it. Inside were 3 things: a locket tarnished, but still shining faintly, a stack of old letters tied with blue ribbon, a folded legal document. Clara picked up the locket first. Inside were 2 photos, her father and Evelyn on one side, her father and Margaret on the other, the same man smiling between 2 worlds. She swallowed hard. He really did love you both. Neither woman spoke. Then Clara opened the legal paper. Her eyes widened. This is a joint deed. Margaret stepped closer. What? It says ownership of the house is equally shared between Evelyn Moore, Margaret Turner, and Clara Turner. Evelyn's eyes filled with shock. He included me? Clara nodded slowly. He did. But the deed wasn't filed. At the bottom of the page was a handwritten note. To be registered only if they both choose forgiveness. 3 women, 1 truth. Silence filled the room again, the kind that carries weight, not emptiness. Margaret turned to Evelyn. He wanted us to share this place, she said, not fight over it. Evelyn's voice cracked. I don't know if I can forgive him. Margaret smiled faintly, tears glinting in her eyes. Then forgive yourself first. Clara watched the 2 women, one who had raised her, one who had unknowingly shaped her fate, and something inside her began to shift for the first time. She saw not rivals or ghosts, but 2 souls, bound by the same man's mistakes and the same kind of love. The tide turns. Outside, the wind began to die down. The sound of the waves softened, as though the sea itself was listening to their silence. Evelyn finally said, he wanted this house to belong to all of us. Maybe it still should. Clara looked between them. It doesn't matter now, she said quietly. It's gone. I sold it. Evelyn smiled faintly. You sold it to me, Clara, to someone who understands what it's worth. I don't want to take it away from you. Clara blinked. What do you mean? Evelyn stepped closer, her voice tender. I want you and your mother to stay. I'll sign it back to your name. I wanted to come home. Margaret's eyes filled. You'd really do that? Evelyn nodded. You wanted us to forgive each other. Maybe this is how Clara felt the tension in her chest ease for the first time in months. Then let's do it, she said softly. Together. The beginning of forgiveness. As the 3 women stood in the quiet of that old room, the sunlight broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the worn floorboards. The house no longer felt haunted. It felt alive again, filled with laughter and tears, and something stronger than both, understanding. But just as Clara thought the past was finally at peace, her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel Hayes. Clara, I just received a call from the county records office. You need to see this. There's another claim on the property, someone else with Turner blood. Clara froze. What? The sea outside roared once more, and the past wasn't done yet. You think the truth has finally set you free until it knocks again, wearing your last name. The sea was calm that morning, too calm. It was the kind of stillness that feels like a pause before something breaks. Clara stood on the porch, phone clutched in her hand, reading Daniel's message again. There's another claim on the property, someone with Turner blood. Her fingers trembled. Another Turner? That wasn't possible. She was an only child. Her father had never mentioned anyone else. Behind her, the sound of clinking cups came from the kitchen. Margaret and Evelyn were talking softly, their voices oddly peaceful after last night's storm of truth. For the first time, they had shared breakfast together quietly, kindly, like 2 women finally letting go of years of silence. But now a new shadow was forming. Clara took a deep breath and called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. Clara, I didn't want to text more until I had proof. Just tell me, she said, her voice tight. There's a man who filed a partial inheritance claim this morning. Daniel said his name is Michael Turner. He says he's James Turner's son. The world seemed to tilt. Her voice dropped to a whisper. That can't be right. Daniel hesitated. He has documentation, a birth certificate, even old correspondence with your father's name on it. It's real." Clara gripped the railing. "Do you have an address?" "Yes, and he's already on his way to the property." The arrival of a stranger. By midday dark clouds had gathered again. The sound of a car engine broke the quiet. A dark blue SUV rolled up the driveway and stopped. A man stepped out, tall, mid-30s, with the same green-gray eyes as Clara's father. He stood for a moment looking at the house as though it were something he'd seen only in dreams. When he saw Clara, he smiled faintly. "You must be Clara Turner." She didn't move. "Who are you?" He extended a hand. "Michael." She ignored it. "Michael who?" He met her gaze steadily. "Michael Turner, James Turner's son." Inside, Evelyn and Margaret appeared in the doorway. Evelyn froze the instant she saw him. Her face went pale. Margaret noticed Evelyn. "What is it?" Evelyn's voice cracked. "I think I know who he is." Clara turned to her sharply. "You what?" Evelyn looked at Michael, her eyes filling. "Your father wrote to me once, years after he married Margaret. He said he had a son he couldn't acknowledge, a boy he'd only seen once." Michael nodded slowly. "He visited us when I was 10. I didn't understand back then. My mother told me he couldn't stay." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God." Clara's chest felt hollow. "You mean you're my brother?" Michael's eyes softened. "Half-brother, I suppose, but yet the past reopens." They sat in the living room, the air thick with disbelief. The sea murmured beyond the windows. Michael explained quietly, "My mother's name was Laura Price. She lived inland. She never asked him for money or acknowledgement. She just wanted him to be a part of my life. But he couldn't. He said it would destroy his family." Evelyn looked down, guilt in her eyes. "He told me he was trying to make things right before he died. I didn't know this was what he meant." Clara rubbed her temples, her voice breaking. "This can't be happening. I just made peace with everything. Now there's another secret." Margaret's eyes filled with sorrow. "Your father carried too many ghosts, Clara. We were all living in his shadows." Michael hesitated. "I didn't come to take anything from you. I came because I got a letter after he died, one that led me here." Clara looked up sharply. "A letter?" He pulled an envelope from his jacket. It was old, sealed in the same faded paper as the one Clara had received. "To my son, Michael, for when you find your way back to the sea." Another letter, another truth. Michael opened it carefully. His voice trembled as he read aloud. "My son, if the world has brought you here, then the sea has done what I never could, bring my children together. You were born of a love I could not keep. But never once did I stop loving you. I failed to be the father you needed. But I pray that one day, you and your sister might stand in the same house and understand each other. Even if you can't understand me, the house is not just wood and sand. It's the story of every person I've ever hurt and every person I've ever loved. I left something else behind for both of you under the lighthouse at the end of the beach. It's yours to find together. Love always, Dad." The words hung in the air like an echo from another life. Clara sat still for a long time. "Then stood the lighthouse," she said softly. "He used to take me there when I was little." Evelyn's voice was barely a whisper. "That lighthouse was where he proposed to me." Margaret looked down, her fingers trembling. "It's where he told me he loved me for the first time. 3 women, 1 man. And now another child of his standing among them." The truth was no longer just painful. It was unbearable. The lighthouse at dusk. The sky had turned the color of rust and gold. By the time they reached the old lighthouse at the end of the shore, the path was overgrown, but familiar. The sea crashed harder now, waves breaking against the rocks below. Inside the lighthouse, dust floated in the shafts of fading light. The air smelled like salt and rusted metal. At the center of the floor was a loose stone. Just as Clara remembered, she knelt and pried it open. Beneath it lay a metal box, sealed with a latch. Together she and Michael lifted it out. Inside were 3 items. A photograph, all of them together. James, Margaret, Evelyn, and a much younger Laura Price. A letter addressed to all of you. A small, carved wooden shell. Clara unfolded the letter slowly. "If you're reading this, then you've all come together the way I prayed you would. I built this house and this lighthouse to hold my mistakes. But maybe they can hold your forgiveness instead. You are not each other's enemies. You are what remains of my love, scattered in different directions. This place was never meant to be owned. It was meant to be shared. Let the sea have its secrets. And let my children have each other. The wooden shell belongs to the sea. When you're ready, throw it back. That's how I'll know you've forgiven me." Clara's eyes filled. Michael looked away, his jaw tight. Evelyn covered her mouth to hide a sob. Margaret whispered, "He wanted us all here together," and for the first time, they were. The forgiveness ceremony. They stood outside, facing the roaring sea. The wind whipped at their hair, and the sun began to sink into the horizon, painting the world in gold and red. Clara held the small wooden shell in her palm. It was warm, smooth, carved with 3 initials, CMM. "Clara. Michael. Margaret," she whispered. She looked at her mother, then at Evelyn, and finally at Michael. "I think this was his way of telling us that love isn't a line, it's a circle. It comes back around. They all nodded together. They stepped closer to the edge of the rocks. Clara raised her hand and threw the shell into the sea. It disappeared beneath the waves, and for a moment, the world felt still again, not silent. Not empty, just still. The sea remembers. As they turned back toward the beach house, the tide began to rise, washing away their footprints. Evelyn and Margaret walked side by side, the quiet between them soft and unbroken. Michael walked ahead, shoulders heavy but eyes calm, and Clara followed behind, her heart lighter than it had been in years, unaware that the sea hadn't finished with them. Yet because beneath the waves something glinted, a flash of metal, a shape small, round, and engraved with the name James Turner. The sea had one last secret left to tell. Some houses are made of walls and windows. This one was made of promises, and one last secret buried by the tide. The sea was calm again the next morning, unervingly calm. It shimmered like glass, the horizon blurring into the sky. Clara stood on the porch, staring out at it as the wind carried the faint scent of salt and rain. The events of the last few days had left her hollow, but strangely peaceful. Her mother was inside, resting with Evelyn. Michael had left early to get breakfast from town. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again, like it had been holding its breath and had finally exhaled. But as Clara's gaze drifted to the old lighthouse, she froze. Something glinted beneath the surface near the rocks, the same spot where she had thrown the wooden shell the night before. She narrowed her eyes. The sunlight caught it again, metallic, deliberate. Her heart started to pound. The discovery. Minutes later, Clara was in the water. It was cold, biting at her skin as she swam toward the reflection. The current was mild, but the deeper she went, the heavier her chest felt. Her fingers brushed against something hard, metal. She dove down, grabbed it, and pulled. It was stuck in the sand. After a few desperate tugs, it came loose, sending a small cloud of silt swirling around her. It was a rusted tin box, smaller than the one from the lighthouse, sealed tight but still intact. She swam back to shore, coughing and shivering as she dragged the box onto the sand. For a long time, she just stared at it. The latch was corroded, but when she pried it open, it gave with a sharp snap. Inside was a single envelope, perfectly dry, protected by layers of wax paper. Her name was written across it: to Clara, my daughter, for when the truth finally finds the shore. Her hands shook as she opened it. The last letter: my dearest Clara, if you found this, it means you've uncovered more than I ever deserved you to know. I have asked too much of your heart already. But there is one more truth, one I buried beneath the sea, because I couldn't bear to let it destroy you. You think you were my daughter by birth, and in every way that matters, you are. But the truth is, you were never born to Margaret, you were born to Evelyn. Margaret knew. She agreed to raise you when Evelyn couldn't. Your mother was ill then, fragile, heartbroken. And I couldn't lose either of you. Margaret took you as her own, out of love, not deceit. She wanted to give you the life she thought Evelyn couldn't. You were the bridge between them, the child of their shared forgiveness. If the sea has given you this letter, it means it's time you finally know who you are. Not a mistake, not a burden, but the love that held three broken people together. Let them both tell you their truths now. They deserve that much. And you deserve peace, love, always, Dad. Clara dropped the letter, her vision blurring. The world spun around her. She tried to breathe, but the weight of those words pressed against her chest like the tide itself. She wasn't Margaret's daughter. She wasn't even who she thought she was. The confession. By the time she reached the porch, she was drenched and trembling from the cold, from the truth, from everything. Margaret and Evelyn looked up in alarm as she stumbled in, clutching the soaked box. Clara? Margaret stood quickly. What happened? Clara's voice cracked. You knew? Margaret froze. Knew what? Clara slammed the letter onto the table. You knew I wasn't your daughter. Evelyn gasped. Her hands flew to her mouth. Margaret's face went white. For a long, painful silence, she said nothing. Then she sank slowly into a chair. I wanted to tell you, she whispered. God knows I did. Clara's eyes filled with tears. Then why didn't you? Why let me live my whole life thinking because it didn't matter? Margaret said through tears. Because from the moment I held you, you were mine. I promised Evelyn I'd protect you, that I'd raise you as if you came from my own heart. And I did. Evelyn sobbed quietly. I was so young. Clara, I was sick, terrified. James thought I couldn't survive the birth. When I did, it was too late. Margaret had already stepped in. We both loved you so much that we couldn't find a way to tell you without breaking your heart, or each other's. The room filled with the sound of both women crying. Clara pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed by grief and love at once. You both lied to me. Margaret shook her head. We both chose you. That's not a lie, Clara, that's love. The realization. Clara went silent. The waves crashed faintly beyond the windows. She turned to look at them, and somehow, for the first time, they didn't sound mournful. They sounded like truth. She thought about her father's words. You were the bridge between them, and suddenly, it all made sense. The house wasn't cursed with secrets. It was built on them to hold them. Until love was strong enough to survive them. Margaret had raised her, Evelyn had given her life. Both had loved her in their own broken, beautiful way. She walked over to them, hands trembling, and took each of their hands. Then maybe, she whispered, we can stop hiding from it now. Both women nodded, tears streaming freely. Margaret leaned forward, pressing her forehead against Clara's. You were the best thing that ever happened to both of us. The sea's final gift. That evening, they stood once again by the shore. The sun dipped low, turning the sea copper and gold. Michael joined them silently, watching the waves. You found something else, didn't you? He asked softly. Clara nodded and handed him the letter. He read it, his expression heavy but gentle. When he finished, he looked at her and smiled faintly. Guess that makes you my sister in every possible way. Clara smiled through her tears. I guess it does. They stood together, 4 lives, once tangled in lies, now bound by trust. The tide rolled in, touching their feet. Margaret whispered, do you hear it? Evelyn nodded. The sea. Clara looked out at the horizon. No, she said softly, it's him. The wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of waves breaking against the rocks, steady, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. And for the first time since he'd died, it didn't feel like the sea was taking something away. It felt like it was giving something back. Final scene. 1 year later, a new family photograph sat on the mantel. Clara, Margaret, Evelyn, and Michael standing together on the porch of the newly rebuilt beach house. The nameplate on the front read Turner Haven. For those the sea brought home. The walls were freshly painted white, but the sound of the waves still hummed through every beam, every window, every breath of air. Clara often sat on the porch at sunset, her mother beside her, a quiet smile on her face. Sometimes she still heard her father's voice in the distance, carried on the wind. I built this house to hold my mistakes, but you turned it into something worth keeping. And Clara would whisper back, we're home, Dad. We're finally home. The waves would crash softly, as if answering, and then fade into the kind of silence that means peace.